So I think it seems things have quieted down on the invite side. So I would like the chance to welcome you to NND's Bidders Conference for the IT support systems we are to procure for the decommissioning and waste management processes at Norsk Nuclear Decommissioning. I'm Ole Jakob Ottestad. I'm the ICT manager at NND and will do most of the presenting here today, together with Kirill Myatsin, who will help out later on when it comes down to the contracts. When it comes to the agenda, we will give you a short introduction to the NND's mission as overall mission. We will discuss a bit about the procurement goals that we have for the two procurements that we're now just putting forward. We also want to go through with you our thoughts about the desired solution that we're looking for, and also some visions on how we could evolve these systems over time. And we will also go through the procurement process itself and give some insights into how the contracts are structured and what we are looking for you to fill in your answers around the contracts. At the end of the session, we will have a question and answer session, and we please ask you to either post your questions in the chat of the meeting during the meeting, or save the questions for the end. We will take everything collected at the end. If we're not able to answer your question up front in this meeting, we will present that answer together with all the answers that we give during the meeting in a written form, also through the competition tool that you've already entered into. As you probably noticed, we will record this meeting and we intend to publish the recording at NND's website after the conference, and by attending the meeting you consent to this publishing. We also intend to publish the slides that we're going through today, so you will have access to that material also post process. Please remember to mute your microphone when you're not speaking, and also you might want to leave out your camera when not speaking yourselves. Okay, so let's just delve into that. First on NND's mission. And NND was formed 2018 as a governmental agency under the Norwegian Ministry of Trade, Industry and Fisheries, tasked with cleaning up the remains from the nuclear age heritage in Norway. So in Norway we have a political decision to stop using nuclear power at all inside of our country, and subsequently we have to decommission the two physical nuclear facilities that we have in Norway, and that's tasked for NND. In addition, NND is tasked with choosing and building a final deposit for all levels of radioactive waste, which is going to be hosted somewhere in Norway, yet to be decided. We also have a task around some old mines with a slight bit of thorium. We will not go more into that, but that's more or less how it is. The facilities that we are to work on are located in Halden and at Kjeller. At Halden there is one research reactor that's just been closed down, the same at Kjeller, one that's just closed down, but at Kjeller there are also two historical reactors that have been decommissioned already to the standard of that time of that decommissioning, and we need to look into and repeat part of that decommissioning as part of the total process for NND. The facilities themselves are today owned by and operated by Institute for Energiteknikk, who holds the license from the national regulator, and we're now co-planning the decommissioning with IFE, and the plan is for the nuclear division of IFE to be transferred to NND, probably somewhere in the region of 1st of January 2024, when we anticipate to have a license to operate and decommission the facilities from NND. Timelines in decommissioning are quite long. Currently, we still have fuel in both Kjeller and Halden inside of the reactors. We need to remove those. We need to start planning and obtain the final decommissioning plan before we can start actual work. This will take somewhere between 5 to 8 more years to do, and then we'll start doing the actual decommissioning tasks. And we hope to have finished those around about 2040. Part of the tasks that IFA have today, and we also will inherit at NND, is to receive low-level waste from industries, hospitals, and so on in Norway for processing and deposits, and we will keep doing so for another 100 years after 2040. And then, as soon as we close the formal deposit, we will need to monitor it for another, say, 400 years. The facilities both in Halden and at Kjeller are now so-called sensitive objects, as pointed out by the Protective Security Act in Norway, and this has bearings on the contracts that we're looking for and how we could do work around both the planning and the performance of the decommissioning. So we'll come back to this in a bit more depth later on in the presentation. And the overall goal for the nuclear facilities and the decommissioning of this is to return the facilities that we have to hopefully greenfield, but maybe brownfield, so civil use of the areas after we finished the decommissioning of the sites. Last summer, we went into a market dialogue where we asked for advice on our plans to establish efficient methods based on international best practices for the methods and the tools around decommissioning, treatment and storage of radioactive material, and operation and maintenance of the facilities that we are to decommission and operate in parallel. During part of the feedback from the market led us to realize that we already have sufficient methods and IT support systems for the operation and maintenance of the facilities. So we've now de-scoped a bit to say that the procurement we have now is going to cover the decommissioning and the treatment and storage of radioactive material as such. We've decided to, in the requirement specification for the procurement, we decided to split the requirements into 2 separate support systems, each supporting one of the main processes. And this is partly due to the market feedback that we got, and also from the understanding that we gained that there are a lot of maybe the preeminent organization of decom activities in other countries are, the decommissioning handled by one organization, the waste management by one organization, and the deposit by a third organization. And this seems to have formed what kind of support systems that's already out there. So in order to cater for a possible commercial off-the-shelf implementation at NND, we've tried to divide the support systems into the same chunks as we've seen internationally. Having said that, NND is, in one way, maybe not unique, but we have positioned ourselves for integrated processes in that in Norway, all of those, all parts of the decommissioning, all from the planning and performing of the decommissioning, the treatment and storage, the transports and the deposits of radioactive waste material are going to be handled by one organization. This means that we have the opportunity to tightly integrate all the procedures and operations around this when it comes also to the IT support systems. The procurement that we put out now, we have to have some overall goals, and obviously, the safe and secure decommissioning and waste management is the preliminary goal. But we also want to make sure that we have efficient processes, that we automate the processes that we can, that we have interconnected processes so that we don't have disconnect between IT support systems for one thing and IT support systems for another thing. We also have the goal of reusing the 70 plus years of data and systems accumulated by IFE already. And we have put down the intention that we try to do one-stop data gathering, meaning that if we go out and do a measurement, for instance, in the facilities, we want to make sure that we know what we measured, it's verifiable that we've done it with the right methods. If we're going to do several measures in the same part of the facilities, let's do them all at the same time to reduce the number of steps that need to go into the site. So these are sort of where we try to formulate goals, where we try to make efficient and use of the manpower we have, and also make sure that when we do measurement to document things, they are to be trusted and to be documented in such a way that we can reuse it later. Especially in the early phase of the decommissioning, there's a lot of decisions needed to be made, and we want as many of those decisions as possible to be based on data. So we want some sort of data accumulation and data visibility to support the different decisions that we're going to make, either on waste treatment plans, or it's going to be, you know, what kind of steps are we going to go through, and so on and so on. All this we want to have as good data visualization event as possible in order for us to make the good decisions that will have, you know, lead us to the quickest, fastest, cheapest way of doing things. Also, since we already have data, when we're looking at new systems, we want those systems to be able to enhance and augment the data that we gather in one system with data from other systems. We've already covered that this is going to be a long haul. It's going to be a long time frame around this, and this forms, you know, our understanding on how the play between us as the customer and you as the contractors need to be. So when we're looking for contractors now, we're looking for someone that wants to enter into a long-term partnership. And as you will see later on, we've put forward a suggested contract that could last as long as maybe 25 years. And this is why we do this. It's because we want to invest heavily in the support systems for the main processes, and we think it's going to be important for us to have, you know, a long-standing and a proven contractor for that period of time. So we're looking for contractors that, you know, are stable and can show us there is stamina, you can stay the long run. We also want to look into solutions where we don't have lock-ins. So there should be open interfaces, open data formats, and standardized protocols, so that if we need to change things over, you know, the next 25, 50, 100 years, we should be able to do so with minimal effort when it comes to the data and the data gathering. And we also want to be able to take the data that we gathered and put those into archives and formats that can live for a long time. Obviously, since we're talking about a partnership, we also look for contractors that can help us choose the right architecture, right methods, guide us on best practices, and so on. It's obvious that there's not going to be one vendor only for NND. So another thing that we are going to be looking for are contractors that exhibit the ability to work with other contractors, so that we get the best of NND for NND, and keep the best of NND in your mind when you work with us and together with other contractors. We also expect that a lot of the requirements that we put down will change gradually over time, or maybe incrementally over time. Hence, you will need to have the ability to keep the product that we're buying up to date and do further development around it. All contractors also need to be delivering in compliance with the National Security Act in Norway. We put down the requirements that we think is absolutely crucial for you to meet this, but again, you need to be aware that the National Security Act will be part of what we need to take into consideration. And if you are, if you have a COTS solution that will fits the requirements, that's okay. That's good. We will look favorably on that, but we won't disqualify you if you don't have something from the nuclear industry. But as long as that sort of fits into the requirements that we have. And if you're in this and you are in long term, obviously, if you are into the R&D and want to drive digitalization in the nuclear industry, that I think would be a bonus for us, but not a requirement. Now, I'm going to go over to talk a bit more about the solution as such. And if you look at the whole thing a bit, from Hawk's eye, it's all about a logistics problem, isn't it? It's all about knowing what we have there out in the facilities with the SSCs. We need to be able to divide it up to chunks that we can handle. We need to treat it, we need to measure it, we need to further subdivide it, we need to package it, we need to again measure it, we need to transport this in a safe manner, and then at the end we need to deposit it in a manner that is in compliance with the regulators' requirements. And all through this we need to know where everything is and what kind of state it is in. So that's the problem that we have to solve together in an overall fashion. And one of the things that we need to discuss is where does decommissioning stop and waste management start? We'll come back to that as well. In the requirement specification, we've put up this kind of very overview on the architectural systems architecture. But what we're saying really is that we intend there to be one decommissioning support system, one waste management support system, which we put forward requirements for, and those need to talk to each other and also to other legacy systems at NND, and especially the ones that comes from the maintenance and operations of the support systems. We also put down the notion of the NND common information model, and in our view, a common information model is vital in order for us to be able to digitalize the information and the processes that we have. And the common information model is also needed to combine the existing and the new data that we are gathering. And it's also intended to help us support that logistics tasks that they're around. We've proposed something we call an NND key to be used to tie together the common information model. That key is based on something called tvärfaglig märkesystem, and I'm sorry I haven't found a good English translation for that. But it is a Norwegian standard now in Norway and used mainly in the building information systems. So coming from a BIM world, you will recognize the structure as this key. If we look at what we're asking for here, so this is, in our view, roughly a system architecture and a system environment, more or less, that we expect to have after the delivery. And in this, the decommissioning support system, the DSS, is one big chunk. The other big chunk is the waste management support systems. We expect you to have open interfaces towards the users, towards instruments and data that we use to gather, towards lab results, measurements, and so on that comes in to this. In the same fashion, we expect the waste management to have open interfaces towards users, towards instrumentation in the waste processing, and so on. We also expect you to either use open interfaces or interface on the specifications that we're given towards the legacy systems and that we have already. And we propose that the key to use this is in the key, the tvärfaglig märkesystem. When you look at the requirements, you will see that it seems to be some sort of an overlap of requirements in between the DSS and the VMSS. In the requirement specification, there is a section giving common requirements for both systems when it comes to ICT security rules and so on and so forth. And then the requirement specification goes on to talk about these functions that we have for each systems. Now, I think I just want to emphasize that in the DSS, we expect that DSS to have some sort of visualization engine in the bottom. It doesn't need to be a BIM environment as such, but we expect 3D visualization and visualization of point clouds, dose clouds, whatever, to be part of the decision making process that we have, and we expect the tools, especially around the DSS, to support us in that. Also in the VMSS, we expect a lot of procedural help in reception, treatment, transport, and storage of the waste. And again, here there's a lot of things going on. We do have a parallel project in at NND that will look at the physical waste streams and the physical machines needed to treat the waste. And obviously, part of what we need to do is to be able to interface the chain, those machines when we build up the waste treatment parts for it. Now, obviously, as you see here, there's some sort of overlap, and part of that overlap is that we anticipate that there will be some part proposed from your side on functionality that overlap. And we think that the finalization of the distribution of that labor and functionality is something that we need to close in the negotiation part of the contract and then delivered by you during the development and implementation phase of the project. And examples of division of labor questions that we need to discuss, is which system defines the content of a waste package? Is this part of the decommissioning planning, or is it part of the waste management support system? Another question that we could discuss is when we have a waste package and we start doing measurements on characterization of the package itself, does that belong to the waste management system or to the decommissioning support system and so on? So a lot of sort of edges that we need to clear out during the negotiation phase. The natural consequence of that uncertainty is also that the interfaces between the DSS and the VMSS are not described in the requirements, and we will need a delivery under the contract to define those interfaces. So here we expect you to actually include interface specification part as part of the implementation project that we're looking at, and that will be after we have decided the division of labor between the two main systems. If you look at the information model that we had earlier on, and I just wanted to reiterate this, the information model is not one physical database. It's the synthesis of all the data that we gather and that we store in different databases around. So this means that we need to make sure that we know which data originate where and who is the master and owner of that data throughout the whole process and whole processes. And I think it's just important for you to understand that that's how we think around the information model, not as a physical database, but as a logical entity that ties together everything that we do have of data. One of the consequences from the Security Act in Norway is that we've decided to run the support systems in an on-premise infrastructure that the customer, so NND, will control and operate. This means that the deployment model that we expect you to follow is for you to do development at home on trial data that you generate yourselves, and you will deliver to us ready for acceptance test. You will help us and support us do an install in the customer's test environment, the customer, so NND, will do acceptance testing, and when we're agreeing on this being ready for production, we will move this on to the production environment. And NND will do application operations in this environment as well, but we do expect support and maintenance from the contractors also in the phase where we're running in production and in acceptance test. And we will come a bit back to, there's a reference a few contracts in the top arrows there with the initial development, further development, preventive maintenance, and error problems corrections. Those are all parts of the deliverables that we have defined in different contracts. And I think it's also important to note that this deployment model is something that we think we will not only use it during the initial deployment, but also during the support and maintenance phase. So, we're moving out of the sharp requirements that we have in the requirement specification, but more into to give you an understanding of where we think we are going to move with the system over time. So, as we've said, we expect a lot of changes over the next 25 years. So so the system needs to be able to change with the environment. With new instruments and methods, with new IT support systems that we need to integrate, and our ERP is one example of such an interface. We might need new functionality within the core systems. We might need new interfaces to the core systems, and we might need to phase in new treatment methods, new instruments on the waste treatment, tools and processes, and so on and so forth. So we're looking for an architecture within those two core systems that will be able to handle a changing environment as well in a controlled, efficient, safe, and secure manner. We also already now started to look beyond the requirements that we've framed, and just to be absolutely clear, the content on this slide is not part of the current procurement, but part of our vision for what might come in the future. So we're gathering a lot of data, especially around the facilities, and we think and we foresee that we will use a lot of those data and the 3D models that we create in both a mixed reality environment or a virtual reality environment. In the mixed example of use cases in the mixed reality environment could be a remote worker on a VR with a local worker on the AR, working on solving a specific problem within the facilities, for instance, seeing the same thing, giving each other advice. We're looking at using VR for training and maybe even MR, AR for training of people coming into the facilities, but also maybe performing training off-site prior to coming to the facilities. We're looking to start to use robots for different use cases. One of them could be, for instance, early clearance of buildings before we do the final measurements in order to sort of see things. It could be use of robots in storage or a deposit to ensure that we do stay within the waste acceptance criteria and so on. And we need to be able to cater for that with the geographical information that we already sorted out through our new systems. We're looking to see how we could integrate a risk-based approach to working with the facilities in this, either that being hazards or maybe even risks connected to safety studies, and see if we could use the DSS in particular, but also the VMSS to communicate with the regulator and make sure that we have decision support that helps us understand when we need to update safety studies, for instance. And also there is a lot of other use cases around simulations on how to perform work in which steps do you want to do the decommissioning, what kind of processing do we need, how many processing lines do we need to be able to take out things in this and this scenario, and so on. So we're trying to push the boundaries a bit. I think from the market dialogue, we understand that this is probably a bit on the future side of things, but it might be in near future as well. And we are working with the research part of Institute for Energy Technique to do some piloting around this already. So stepping out of the solution as such, we have a timetable for the procurements. We're now in the stage 1, the qualification, and it works like this. We have some qualification requirements that you need to fulfill in order to up and deliver to us for the deadline of the 5th of May. NND will then have an internal evaluation of the requests for qualifying, and those qualifying and those we choose to take with us into stage 2 will get notice of this the 19th of May. There's one word of caution around this date, the 5th of May. We fully expect you to form coalitions or consortiums for deliveries. We would urge you not to try to change those consortiums after the 5th of May. Trying to change those will probably lead to disqualification due to competition rules, both in Norway and in EU. So make sure that when the consortium you bid on for the 5th stays stable throughout this competition. We will give you summer, for those selected, we will have you have most of June, July, August to prepare your tenders. During this time in June, we will offer a one-on-one meeting for those wanting that to discuss any uncertainties and clear things in requirement specifications. And mid-September, we will start a phase with negotiations. We will then negotiate in 2 or 3 steps, depending on the outcome of things. And hopefully we will be able to sign contracts by the end of this year. The 19th, the number of qualifying suppliers will be a minimum of 3 on each procurement, but we will have to see how many we will take forward, but at least 3 will be chosen inside of each procurement to go forward. And depending on the interest and the quality of what we get, we might choose to include more than 3 as well as part of those. The last slide on my side now, we're just wanted to again pick up the thread on the security graded procurement, since we do have a sensitive object. We do have information that we valued to what's called restricted or begrenset in Norway. There are some considerations to be taken. So prior to entering a contract, there needs to be a security agreement between NND and the contractor. And the contractor will also need to come from a country that has an active security agreement between Norway and this country. So that's something to check out, that you're in the okay for that. Also, if you're not Norwegian and you're chosen for the contract, the security authority in Norway will need to approve you as a contractor prior for the signing of the contract, just so you're aware of that. And part of what we've asked for in the qualification phase on step 1 is for us to have enough information to ensure that this will not pose too much of a problem when we come down to the contract. And obviously, since there might be some costs around the Security Act as part of the procurement, you have to cover the cost for those yourselves, as with the rest of the work with the procurement. As soon as we are in the contract, you need to be aware that anyone working with NND on information that we have needs to sign the confidentiality agreement. We will background check everyone that gets access to our data, And prior to getting access to data, you also need to have an authorization procedure with a customer where you are authorized to begrense that information in Norway. So this is an administrative procedure that we need to go through, and you need to cater for that when you think about level of works and so on. And also, I think you need to understand that when you come to our facility to do maintenance and support or maybe installation work, you will need to be followed by one of the NND's employees. This means that you should calculate normal office hours for most of the work, obviously outside of putting things into production, which we will do at other times. You will also see in the requirement specifications that we have that the customer will apply for a license for something called a skjermingsverdig informasjonssystem, a restricted information system. This is a process that NND will have to take for the security authority in Norway, but we'll need a lot of information into this, and a lot of security information. We need to document everything on how the application and the infrastructure and the operational procedures are, and we need your support on the information part of that, and you need to cater for that in your estimates. But we've tried to decouple this licensing process from the final delivery date in order to move the risk to the customer and out from the contractor side. And if we're in the unlucky circumstances that the license hasn't been obtained by the delivery date, and then they intend to still start working with the systems, but then only use it with information that's not restricted at that time. But we'll cross that bridge when we come there, but just as you're aware of this. But for your estimates now, make sure that you cater for also helping us with providing the necessary security documentation to apply for that license. Okay, so that sort of concludes my part of the presentation. I will now hand the presentation over to Kirill, who will go through more of the contract side of the procurement. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ole Jakob. My name is Kirill Masin. I'm one of the lawyers who is working on this procurements, or actually two procurements. We have selected a contract model where we have one contract for the delivery of the initial system. It is called Ssat, and another one for maintenance, servicing, upgrades, and everything else, which is Ssav. The SSA family of contracts is Norwegian government contract templates for various IT services. This set of contracts has been developed over a number of years and continually being improved, and new revisions published. We have selected the most recent one, 2018, and those versions are reasonably balanced. The risks are appropriately distributed between the customer and the vendor. We have done some additional adjustments to make sure that, for example, the security aspects of the delivery is properly handled. So you will see that Appendix 8 contains additional changes to the templates, which are partly done to accommodate for the requirements the customer has from the security authorities and the Security Act, but also there are some changes which we know especially international vendors traditionally want. So with those changes, we expect that the need for reservations to the contractual wording is eliminated. And if you feel that there is a need, I would recommend you to ask a question or to read the contracts thoroughly, because there shouldn't be any need to make any changes to the contracts. Could we go on to the next slide, Ole Jakob? So here is this picture shows the expected timelines for the two contracts. The implementation SSAT from 2020 to 2024 for both contracts, and the SSAV would have a very long perspective. So initial contract term of 10 years, and then an option for the customer to renew 3 times by 5 years each. Or actually, it's not an option to renew. Rather, the renewal is automatic, but the customer is able to say, no, I don't want renewal. And this supports Ole Jakob's initial message that we expect to have a long-term relationship with the vendor, and the duration of the SSAV strengthens this vision. So next slide, please. This picture shows a structure of the SSAT contract. SSAT is for the initial implementation of the system. The contract is flexible. It allows for delivery of a solution based on commercial, ready-made, off-the-shelf software. It allows for making customization and adjustments to this ready-made software. It allows for development of smaller or bigger parts of the solution. The contract has a project, a delivery project consisting of various phases. You will see that when you read the contract, there is this specification phase, there is a development phase, several approval phases, pre-production and post-production, and all this should ensure that the deliverables are according to the specifications. The contract itself has general terms for the project, and everything else is described in the appendixes. Appendix 1 and 2 is what is the delivery specification. SSAT does not have a common specification, but rather it is a document with the customer's requirements, and a document, Appendix 2, which describes the contractor's way to meet those requirements. So you will see in the RFP package that Appendix 1 contains NND's requirements for the solutions. You will also see that we have been careful to make sure that the requirements are on a high functional level. So okay, there was some unintended unmute, I believe. So I was saying that we have had attention to make sure that the requirements are expressed on a high functional level, stating a need of the customer. This should allow the vendors to be able to propose different ways to meet those needs, and this has been something we have been very careful about. So saying what is the need instead of us guiding you to how to solve that need. This is what we're asking you to specify. So the specification of the solution will be Appendix 1 and 2. Appendix 3, the customer technical platform. But for this system, there is no pre-existing customer technical platform. Instead, we ask you to provide suggestions on how you recommend the technical platform to be built and specified to make sure that the system will operate as good as possible. There is a document. I'm not going into the others, they are self-explanatory. Another, what is necessary to make look at is Appendix 8, which is changes to the general contractual wording. The SSAT general contract wording is in the main contract text. It is not being changed by editing it. Instead, there is a table of changes saying which section should be amended how. And we ask you, please, to, if you see a need to make any change, you also use Appendix 8 for that purpose. All the appendixes where we expect the contractors to provide input are marked in a special way, and there is also provided some guidance on what the customer expects. SSAV, please, Ole Jakob. SSAV is a support maintenance further development contract, which will live for many years. It has the same structure. Appendix 1 and 2 describe customers' requirements and the contractor's specification. Those requirements are for the services, for the maintenance services, for the future development of any standard software. So here you are expected to provide a description of how this system will be supported, further developed, and kept modern and up to date throughout all those years. Appendix 3 here is a document which does not exist at the moment. It will be prepared when SSAT delivery is made, and it will consist of Appendix 1 and 2 there, and also the agreed detailed specification of the software. So when SSAT, the first implementation project, is delivered, SSAT contract will die. We are going to take necessary specifications and put them in Appendix 3 so that the SSAV contract will live on. It's the same way to make changes here in Appendix 8. Otherwise, you will see placeholders for the contractor's input and the customer's guiding in the documents themselves. Yes, I think this is it about the contract structure. We will, of course, if needed, provide further guidance in the next round with this one-to-one discussions with the selected vendors. I should remind you that it is a public procurement, and there are limited, our ability to accept changes and reservations is limited, because we have to make sure that the bids are comparable. Therefore, we cannot accept that vendors make substantial reservations. If those are made, we would be required to reject the bid. I think this is it for the contracts. We have covered the procurement process. So maybe we should go on to the question and answers, because it's I would imagine it is the most interesting part.
So thank you, Kirill. I'll just think we're going to just mention this. This is the invitation to tender letter that we sent out. In the process, we did show you stage 1 and stage 2 qualification, and just to make absolutely clear on what we expect delivered for the first deadline of step 1. If you go to the invitation to tender, it's the qualification requirements under chapter 4, so it's 4.1 towards 4.9, I think 4.8. So the deliverables from you towards the 5th of May deadline is the ones under chapter 4 in the invitation to tender. So we are not asking you to fill out all the contracts and answer all the requirements that we've gone through in the SSST and SSAV at this stage. That's for stage 2, but it's important for you to understand what it is, because we are asking you to show that you have the capacity to fulfill the contract that we laid out as well. So you need to have a relationship to the contracts already now, even if it is to be part of the final bid on deliverables in August and September. Okay, Kirill, please come back.
Yes, and it's what you just said, Ole Jakob, is repeated in section 10.2 in the ITT document.
Okay, so thank you, Kirill. I think this is, as you said, we've now passed through what we planned to present. So thank you for listening, and we'll open up for questions. There are no questions in the chat that I can see, but I see we have a hand raised from Mark Sharp. So please, Mark.
Good afternoon. It's Mark Sharp from Createch in the UK. I thank you for the presentation. It's very useful background. I just have a question on you mentioned about the pre-qual and the teams, the collaborations to remain the same following the pre-qual to the tender. Is this the same for the business structure of the consortium? If there is a specific business structure, can this change following the pre-qual in terms of who is maybe lead or which members are lead organizations?
I'm going to pass this to you, Kirill, if you want to comment on that.
I would rather take it in writing, if possible. It's
Okay, so Mark, that's a complicated question, and is really part of what you also should have a clear understanding on yourself. It's complicated due to the competition laws in the different countries and so on. So that's why Kirill is now a bit reluctant on answering, I'm guessing.
Okay, I chose a harder. We can submit a question as normal formal question. Yes.
Well, we just noted the question in this recording, and we'll post an answer after when we've considered this a bit.
Yes. Okay. We're noting the question, and it will be answered in a written way.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next raised hand here. If you have Dusan Daniska, please.
Hello. First, thank you for the presentation, Dusan Daniska from company Y and Aquila Costing Software. My question is regarding the Security Act in Norway. I'm not that familiar with that, so I wanted to ask you if it is possible to describe somehow in the written form what are the formalities that each contractor must obey, or maybe just to express some very important points, or where to take a look on to be able to understand the Security Act provisions and so on. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think first of all, the Security Act is quite a large act and goes to govern most of the what's called critical infrastructure in Norway, and it sets out that we have different levels of criticality on different objects, and from that criticality, it derives some requirements on how you are to behave and use risk-based behavior towards securing your object and the information around that object. I think for you as a contractor here, we've tried to take those requirements that you absolutely need to answer and understand. That's part of the presentation and we already gave. So most of all, it's that you have to sign that security agreement. Your people need to be vetted for access to that information, and also it's restricted on how to get into the facilities. Apart from that, there aren't really that many direct requirements on the vendors as such, beyond coming from a country that we do have a security agreement in Norway, and also that the owner structure of your company is such that it doesn't seem to pose a security threat to Norwegian interests. And the last thing is the reason really why we asked for ownership information as part of the qualification phase.
Thank you, but I was also asking about some technical aspects about the software solutions, if there's something that should software contain or so.
Well, that's unfortunately that's even harder to answer, Dusan, because the Security Act itself bases it as the requirements on the owner of that critical infrastructure doing their own risk assessment and then take appropriate technical measures and organizational measures to ensure a reasonable level of safety around those. So it's really left a lot to ourselves to understand this. But part of why we've chosen to deploy on-prem is for us in order to more easily show that we can obtain control over the assets and control over the processes, so that it appears at least that we do have a reasonable level of security when we turn to obtain this license for skjermingsverdig informasjonsobjekt or restricted information system that we're obliged to do. So unfortunately, there's no sort of checklist that you can go in and read and see this is compliant, this is not compliant. It's all about risk perception. What I think is important for us to note between us is that the value of the information that we've had to handle is on the lowest level of importance in the security. So the level needed to obtain reasonable security is not as high as something that you climb in vitality on that information.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hilly.
I should also add that Ole Jakob mentioned that NND would need to get the license to operate the system, and this license, which will have to be obtained, is what would consider the functional aspects of the system, which I think Dusan was asking about. So the functional requirements as a result of the Security Act is actually a customer's risk, because the customer specifies the functional security requirements on the basis of the customer's risk evaluation. And as long as the vendors comply with the security requirements in the contract, then it is the customer who will have the risk of potential non-approval from the authorities.
Thank you, Kirill. And just to enhance and augment that, we've put as appendices to the requirements 2 documents from NND. One is the security architecture document, which is where we derive the requirements based on the Security Act and others, so that the requirements that we post in the security requirements documents are tied to security capabilities, and the security capabilities are derived from our perceived needs from the Security Act. And as Kirill says, as long as you then can be compliant to the specific requirements that we set out as part of SSA T&B, you should be okay and inside of what we perceive as a appropriate risk level for begränsat level in the Security Act. Further questions, please?
It's Newell here from Aviva. I was just thinking, you specified that the initial requirement was software on premises, and for such a long period, I'll guess it's likely to believe that the possibility to move this to cloud on any appropriate time would be an option.
Hard to look into that crystal ball, Newell, I'm afraid.
Just a thought.
But just to try to answer how we think this might happen, and we're not talking next year or 5 years, but maybe 10 years, 15 years ahead. We believe that the Security Act will gradually the level under the Security Act will gradually be decreased, because we're removing the fuel, we're removing things that are more of a security threat if you look at national interests. So we hope, but we don't know, but we hope that at some point down in the future we will be able to degrade the security level from begränsat to normal business sensitivity, and at that time the window sort of opens up a bit more, but no guarantees on that.
No, okay, sounds good. Thank you.
So we have a question from Johan, please.
Yes, it's Johan Newton from Aviva. I wonder, this permanent storage, could that slow down this waste management? I mean, how is that progressing?
Well, an excellent question, I'm afraid. So how we plan around this is, so the permanent storage is set to include capabilities to store high-level radioactive waste. For all practical purposes, that's mostly the fuel. The fuel, as you might have noticed in Norway at least, there is a process of deciding where that fuel is going to go for pre-processing before you put it into deposit. That process is political and it's extremely costly, and it relies on non-proven treatment methods in 1 out of 2 possible vendors. Removing the fuel from the reactors is the crucial point in getting to start the actual decommissioning. Now, not having a political decision on how we're going to treat this, that might be a showstopper for further on. Not having the deposit as such, we're not so worried about, because we're going to build up what's called storage, or temporary storage, and temporary in this setting is probably going to be something between 25 to 40 years when we store radioactive material in casks, for instance, in Ssat. And those are gonna, the actual decisions around that are gonna, part of the planning we do now. And at some point and in the future, we will have procurements around building such storage, I'm guessing.
Yes, thank you.
Any further questions, please? I would also like to remind you that we haven't closed for questions in the competition tool, so you should be able to go into KGV and post a question afterwards if you're if you stumble on something that you need clarifications on. And we've opened that until okay, maybe you could help out on the date 28th, was it? Let's get this date.
I think it's 1 week after today-ish. I'm not sure about the exact date, but we can easily find this. I have ITT on my screen.
So the 26th of April, we have a deadline for closing for questions through that competition. So if you have more questions later on, and so please don't hesitate to post them. We've now answered some, and we have one unanswered question that we will publish an answer to. And it's still, the floor is still open if you still have questions that you need answered during the session. So the total silence seems to indicate that we've explained a bit and hopefully gave you some background into the procurement. I'm extremely happy to see so many of you being here, and I'm hoping that most of you do take the opportunity to help out and qualify for the procurement. We are eager to get started on the NND side, and this being large procurements and large systems and vital systems for NND, there is a high management attendance to the process coming here. So I think we're fair to say that there are quite a few people looking to get results from this procurement process. So we're looking forward to your qualification and afterwards, hopefully, really good bids down the road there. Thank you for attending today. I think we'll just wrap up there. I'm looking forward to hear and meet a lot of you in the processes to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Tack så mycket. Bye bye.
Thank you.